Good evening, everyone. My
Hi.
name is Thomas DeAngelis, and I'm a research associate at the Create Centre, which is a research centre based at the University of Sydney. The Create Centre engages in three main areas of activity: creativity research, the role of the arts in creative education, health and wellbeing, and how the arts transform all levels of education from early childhood through to higher education. Tonight's guest is Jeannie Baker, the acclaimed author and illustrator of a number of award-winning picture books such as Window, Belonging, and my personal favourite, Where the Forest Meets the Sea, which I think I first encountered as a film when I was a primary school student. And I also distinctly remember poring over the book, being ever delighted and surprised by its detail and its story. Going to visit the Daintree rainforest as an adult brought Jeannie's incredible collage illustrations rushing back into my mind. Her characteristic approach to her work, where she uses a unique kind of collage and illustration to bring incredible and evocative detail to her stories, leave the reader with a distinct and almost better than photographic understanding of place, time, and environment. I'm the proud owner of Jeannie's latest work, Desert Jungle, which was gifted to me by tonight's host of the conversation, Professor Robin Ewing. Robin and Jeannie will have a conversation for about 45 minutes, and then there will be a time for questions at the end. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or feel free to unmute and ask them when the time comes. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you this evening from Awakabal land in Newcastle and pay my respects to elders past and present. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. As always, we'd encourage you to become a member of the Create Centre. It's free to join and allows greater access to our community, our work, and other webinars such as these and other in-person events. I'll put the link to our website in the chat and you can sign up for the membership there. And now I'd like to pass to Professor Emerita Robin Ewing.
Thank you, Thomas, and welcome everyone. It's wonderful to have you joining us tonight for what I know will be a really wonderful conversation. And I'm going to ask Jeannie some questions and she's going to respond. We did this a little while ago for the Tasmanian writers and thought the format worked well. So we decided that this might be a good way to hear particularly about Jeannie's latest work, but also about some other important things too. Jeannie, as a starting point for me, one of the strongest themes in your work is the wonder, the beauty, the artistry, the magic of the natural world, and the threats in preserving it. Do you agree that this is a key theme in your work?
Yes, for me, this feeling of total awe, fascination, this feeling of wonder about a particular environment, this sense is the beginning and the driving force behind much of my work. And when this sense, this feeling is especially strong, I've learned to intuitively follow it, and from it, slowly, gradually, my work will evolve.
Do you know how this passion and respect developed for you?
When I think back to my childhood in England, until I was about 10, my family lived opposite a large piece of wasteland, which was originally a rubbish dump that had been revegetated. It was the largest piece of land that eventually led along a small stream to some woods. It was a wonderful playground for my brother and I, and we'd explore it together or singly, build tree houses. We were not supposed to go to the woods. And then David, my now deceased life partner, was passionately interested in the natural environment, and we did lots of exploring together. And it was through meeting him that I came to make Australia my home. A real turning point for me, though, was researching my project Where the Forest Meets the Sea. we're on the full screen image now, aren't we? Yes, great. I decided a rainforest would be a magical place in which to set a picture book. So I researched the various different Australian rainforests, and the one that particularly fueled my imagination was the Daintree rainforest in North Queensland. My books grow from my own experience, so I decided it was important to spend some time there. Here, the rainforest comes down to the beach like a great green wall. And just off the beach here is coral reef, the Great Barrier Reef. So the two most biodiverse environments in the world actually meet here. This is the oldest tropical rainforest in the world, thought to be 180 million years old. I spent several weeks here camping out and exploring this extraordinary place. The experience was incredibly enriching. It changed something in me. And from then on, I was much more open to finding other extraordinary places. The Central Australian desert in the story of Rosie Dock is another place where a project evolved. I love its amazing textures and the rich culture of its Indigenous people and the amazing colours. The giant kelp forests of Tasmania are another environment that absolutely filled me with wonder. The forest I feature in The Hidden Forest is based in Fortescue Bay in the Tasman Peninsula. I learned to scuba dive so that I could sit on the sea floor and quietly watch what was happening around me in the kelp forest. And some of you watching might have had this experience of hanging onto a piece of bull kelp and being tossed about by the ocean. I was amazed by the colours of some of the seaweeds and the rich pinks on the rocks. The adventures and experiences I've had researching my picture books have taken me to some amazing places and reinforced my sense of wonder. Researching Circle, a more recent picture book, involved my going to Alaska to understand the country in which bar-tailed godwits, a migratory shorebird, start their life. The godwits fly non-stop from Alaska to Australia. It's the longest unbroken migration of any animal. In my story, I portray their annual journey to Australia, and only last year, the record for the furthest non-stop flight was given to a godwit who flew from Alaska to North Tasmania. The journey took the bird 11 days and 11 nights without resting, and that fills me with wonder.
Thank you, Jeannie. So your most recent book, Desert Plum, is set in the Sonoran Desert. How did you decide to go to North Mexico as the place for this book?
I saw a couple of paintings set in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona, and I was captivated by the enormous cacti and textured mountains. So I looked online to find more images, and in this way became acquainted with images from the Mexican part of the Sonoran Desert. And the more images I saw and the more I found out, the more my intuition told me that this amazing desert landscape held something for me and that there was an interesting picture book in it.
So, Jeannie, what features stood out for you in first of all, the research that you did, and then when you did your field trip? What features did you choose to focus on?
The Sonoran Desert is the most biodiverse desert in the world. It's got the largest cacti found on Earth. The Mexican part of the desert, and this is a photograph now, contains the greatest variety of plants and animals. And in places, the desert's so rich with life, it almost resembles a jungle, which is why I call my book Desert Jungle. And the part of the desert where my story is set is called the Valley of the Syrians. It's a huge area, over 250,000 square kilometers, named after the Sirius, an extraordinary tree that thrives here and gives the valley much of its character. Among the desert vegetation live many animals, including mountain lions, bobcats, rattlesnakes, tarantulas, eagles, and hummingbirds. Countless plants and animals, some of which are endangered, can only be found here. And there are cave paintings, some of them prehistoric, found on rocks and in rock shelters and caves, created by different groups of hunter-gatherers and fisherfolk, and some of these are up to 7,000 years old. When we think of the meaning of the word desert, we think of somewhere barren and lifeless. By showing the rich and fertile botanical life of the Sonoran Desert, I want to challenge our preconception of the desert as a barren and lifeless place. Recent studies show deserts, not rainforests, are richest in pollinator diversity.
Thank you for that.
The biodiversity of the world's desert is rapidly disappearing as people who believe deserts to be wastelands unknowingly turn them into one.
Jeannie, you're right about the stereotypes. I worked with a Year 3 class with this book this term, and it really did, help challenge the stereotypes they had about deserts. I wonder if you could also tell us about this concept, nature deficit disorder.
Nature deficit disorder is an indifference to the natural world caused by isolation from it. A decreasing number of children today grow up incorporating nature into their sense of home. They can feel so distant from nature that they come to fear it and are indifferent to environmental concerns. And by contrast, children who grow up with an intimate involvement with and a sense of wonder about the life around them learn to respect it and care for the natural world and feel more connected to their local environment. Before traveling to the Valley of the Sirius, I'd been put in contact with Maria Luisa Uribe Meza, a young teacher who grew up in the tiny fishing village there and then taught at her village school. This is her village. And we'd become friends over the internet even before we actually met. And this is Maria with her young daughter, and beside them is my guide while I was in the Sonoran Desert. Maria showed me her master's thesis, which evolved through her personal experience of observing that the children she taught knew little about the plants and animals of their area, and that the knowledge of the older generations was gradually being lost. The children had been taught to fear the animals and natural world around them. For example, Mexican mothers, to keep children in the house, tell them that if they're naughty, coyotes will come after them and eat them. The children grow up without respect for the natural world. The children, she told me, didn't have a strong sense of belonging and connection to their home. Maria also feels that computers and computer games are isolating children from the real world, and I was very conscious of televisions being left on all day in many Mexican homes. The condition Maria described, nature deficit disorder, is a worldwide problem, but I was surprised that it would be a problem here, in a tiny village where the children grow up seemingly surrounded by the power of the natural world. And so, with Maria's support, I went on to develop my story, the story of a child who, with his grandfather's guidance, discovers that the nature he feared is in fact a place of endless wonder.
So, Jeannie, can you tell us more about the story that evolved from all of this experience, please?
I'll read you the story. The first wordless image is of my young protagonist sitting on a rock with headphones on, reading something on the tablet in front of him. The lizard on the rock below him is unobserved. The boy's grandfather calls him Chico, a Mexican Spanish term for a boy that also expresses endearment and connection. In a desert valley surrounded by mountains of rock and cactus is a tiny village, my home. Chico's in his house with a tablet, headphones, and a laptop in front of him. There's a television monitor on the wall depicting the boy's village with the desert in the foreground. I'm hoping to suggest here that Chico's experience of the natural world is mostly from his computer. The next spread depicts the same image from the television screen on the previous page. Chico's home village can be seen in the background, and if you look really carefully, you can find Chico's house. A coyote is now depicted in the foreground. I never wander far from home because I think coyotes will take me. I hear them howling in the night, and the village dogs start barking. The coyote is a species of the dog family native to North America. It's smaller than its close relative, the wolf. The highly intelligent coyote is often depicted in American folklore as a cunning trickster. Unlike wolves, which have seen their public image improve, attitudes towards coyotes are mostly negative. Then I go and stay with Grandpa. He wants to show me the place where he grew up. It is far from any village. When we arrive, Grandpa suggests we go exploring, but I only want to play on my tablet. That evening, I leave my bag outside the ranch house. It has everything in it, even the cake my mother made for us. But when I go to get the cake, my bag is gone. I am miserable without my tablet. So in the morning, I go looking for my bag, not thinking about where I am going until I realize I don't know where I am. I sense unseen eyes watching me. I hear scrunching, scratching, snapping. I panic and run. Thorns catch my clothes and I stumble, sprawling in the dust. Unknown plants loom menacingly over Chico as if they're reaching out to grab him. He's frightened and brandishes a stick in his hand, ready to fight. In my mind, this spread illustrates the quote by Chief Dan George at the beginning of the book. What you do not know, you will fear. What one fears, one destroys. I pick myself up and try to stay calm. After a while, I realize I can see the shape of the mountain behind the ranch house. It shows me the way back to Grandpa. My bag is gone, I sob, and this place scares me. It's a desert jungle. Grandpa is impressed that I worked out how to find my way back. Why, Chico, he says, why be afraid? Chico's grandfather shows him paths through the cactus and the scrub and teaches Chico the names of the plants and the importance of giving the desert creatures space. On the way back to the ranch house, Grandpa tells me, this valley is full of secrets, Chico. Open your heart, listen, and see what wonders show themselves. From this vantage point, we can see the contrast between the ranch property, which is mostly bare of plants, and the land beyond its fence. Gradually, Chico, having nothing else to do, starts exploring on his own, discovering some of the wonders of his environment. One afternoon, I'm walking in the mountains when the sky suddenly grows dark. A great wind comes from nowhere, hurling leaves and branches in the air. I run into a cave for shelter. When my eyes adjust to the darkness, deep in the shadows, I make out a coyote. My heart thumps, our eyes lock. There is a thundering crash as a tree falls. I look back, the coyote is gone. My heart is still pounding. Did I imagine it? When the wind is quieter, I make my way back to the ranch house and meet Grandpa. He's been frantic looking for me. I'm so glad to see him and tell him about the coyote. The next day, I take Grandpa to my cave. Look, Grandpa, a coyote was here. See the tracks? Coyote is still here, Grandpa murmurs, pointing at the wall, and in so doing, highlighting the ancient nature of this landscape, of this ecosystem. Chico is now captivated by the landscape and all that it holds. He's learnt to give the desert creatures space and learnt the value of watching, waiting, and listening for all the life that hums within his desert home. And then the final image shows the boy sitting on a rock, echoing the first image in the book. But here he's closely observing the lizard beside him, and there's no tablet in sight, bringing the story full circle to show the change to the boy who grows from fearing his unfamiliar desert environment to realizing it as a place of endless wonder.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Can you tell us whether the boy and the grandpa are based on real people you met while you were there?
Yes, I usually base the characters in my stories on real people. So when I went on my field trip in the Sonoran Desert, I was looking to find the two characters in the story I was developing. And I gave a talk at a village school, and in this way I met Francisco. He was about 10 years old and was one of just 3 boys at the small village school. He seemed right as the boy in my story, so I approached him and his mother, explained about my story, and asked if I could take photos of him. They agreed for a payment of 200 rupees. I also approached Mario, a man I'd noticed in the same village who I thought had character. I purposely made him look older in my story and grayed his hair. I took a lot of photos of Mario and Francisco acting out my story, though at that point my story was fairly developed.
Okay, can we go back to that quote by Chief Dan George? What you do not know, you will fear. What one fears, one destroys. How do you think we can address our ignorance and fear and our children's ignorance and fear in relation to the natural environment?
Rachel Carson often said that the child's positive connection to nature depends on 2 things: special places and special people. As parents and educators, we can spend more time with children in nature. We need to schedule nature time. Young children should know about threats to the environment, but they also need direct experience with nature purely for the joy of it. Unless we achieve that balance, many children will associate nature with fear and destruction for the rest of their lives. Connecting our children to nature is a way to both deal with the impact of loss of nature and to plant the seed, sometimes literally, of a nature-rich future.
Wow. I think there's a lot in there for all of us. Can we just go back now to talking a little bit about your collage techniques, Jeannie? They're unique, and I know that you have developed them right from your college days. With this book, were there new techniques that you needed to develop to represent this desert jungle?
Yes, each project gives me new challenges, and I often need to do a good deal of experimentation before I can work out the best way to try and achieve the textures and effects I'm hoping for. And one of the biggest challenges in Desert Jungle was to work out a technique to capture the corrugations and the various forms and sizes of cacti. And Jim Hood, a good friend, came up with a great solution. We drew a pattern of the outer diameter of the specific corrugations I wanted on a sheet of thick plastic, made up the cacti color we wanted from Sculpey, and then squeezed this through the cutout plastic pattern using an adapted metal hand press, the kind you can easily buy from hardware stores for using various fillers. When the Sculpey was extruded, it could be stretched and carefully manipulated into the shapes I wanted before being baked set. I found the easiest way to recreate cactus thorns was to use actual cactus thorns. So I've been growing cactus on the flat roof I can climb onto from my bedroom window. It's the only place around my home that catches sufficient sun for the cactus to grow. I felt bad carefully shaving the clumps of spines from the cactus until they were bald, and I wasn't sure if they'd be able to survive this. But the large shaved bald areas of the cactus haven't regrown, though the cactus continues to thrive, growing larger and growing more thorns. Portraying wind was another challenge, and I ended up adding several layers of perspex to the relevant works on which I painted my wind effects and stuck my wind-blown branches, dust, and debris.
Mm. Well, thank you for that. I just have one last question, and I hope others have questions in the chat. How do you see your role as an artist or as an advocate for the natural environment and our need to preserve it, or both?
I like to hope that my work is seen in both ways. Yeah.
Yeah. But as an artist first, do you think? To represent what you see?
Yeah, definitely that feeling comes first, and that's the driving force, yes.
Mm.
And unless I had a passion for something, I wouldn't have the energy to do it.
Yeah, well, it takes a long time. I think this book took 4 years.
It was actually 6 years' work.
6 years.
With all the research, everything, then yes.
Wow.
And getting works ready for exhibition, yes.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Well, I've had the privilege of asking all those questions. I'm sure there are others. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeannie and Robin. I wanted to ask whether your stories are so linked to place. I'm curious to know what it is about the collage that you think, it's a sort of a question, and I'm sure you've been asked this before. Why collage and why not photography or illustration in the kind of conventional sense? What is it for you about collage that lends itself to the stories that you tell?
I've always really loved texture, so I'm working directly with textures. I suppose I like the tactile sense of collage. I like the fact that I can get a sense of dimension, a sense of space in the work. They're not flat. And then when they're photographed, there are slight shadows created. And that also helps give the illusion of space. I find it very challenging technique. It's not an easy technique to work with. And I think that's another thing, the challenge of it, that's kept me involved. That I can never totally get on top of it. And there's always more to find out, and there's always more to experiment with.
And then another sort of technical question. I've always been curious to know how large the collages are, before they're photographed. Are they, because to me, they seem enormous, like your ability to create a sense of scale is really remarkable. And so I assume that they are, like a meter squared or something. But how big are the collages? What scale are you working at?
Usually they're the same size as reproduced, so they're miniatures. And there's something about miniature that captivates me. And it's like if I created the various parts the same scale as the real world, somehow there's not much point. And actually, one of the other things I really like about working with collage is what I'll often do is I'll use textures, but in my miniature way. But those textures have come from real life, so that the scale is wrong. So they're slightly exaggerated, but that exaggeration works for me.
Thank you very much. Did anyone else have any other questions for Jeannie?
I'm going to ask a question. Hi, Jeannie. It's been such a pleasure to be able to listen to you tonight. I've been a huge fan of your work for many, many years. So it's lovely to hear you speak about your work. And I'm just wondering, do you take a break between projects, or as you're finishing one, is there another one starting to bubble? How do you kind of manage that I suppose the inspiration or your wonder, as you were kind of talking about before?
Towards the end of a project, so my work has to be finished a year before it's actually in print form. And in that year, I'm preparing the works for exhibition. But I'm also thinking and developing a new project. So there's a bit of a crossover, which works for me.
Lovely, thank you.
Jeannie, I suppose it's probably a question everyone's thinking, what's next?
I know what's next, but I'm not going to talk about it.
Okay.
It's when a project comes out, when it's released, I have to talk about it so much, and I've learned just to keep things really quiet. And also, I've also learned that if I talk about a project too much, it kind of cements it before it's really ready. So it actually doesn't help it.
I think Alison was going to ask a question.
So you must have an enormous repository of works. I mean, I know you're saying they're sort of to scale of the books, but they're hard things to store. Have you got a warehouse full of your artworks and also all your collage stuff and things like that? I mean, how can you possibly walk down the street without not coming home with your pockets full of stuff?
If I did that and just was forever collecting, I'd have to keep getting more houses. It would be totally unmanageable, and I'd never know where to find anything because I'd have too much stuff. So I'm usually only collecting for the particular project I'm currently working on.
Wow.
Unless something is extraordinarily special and I know I'm not going to find it again easily. So that's not really a problem.
So you're very disciplined then?
I don't think of it like that, but maybe. But also storing my work, I tend to only part with my work now as complete projects, because otherwise it's like decorative art. So if institutions are interested, we can usually come to some kind of agreement, and they then take the whole project. But the projects that I still have here at home, they always travel now as exhibitions. So I have crates made to store them in.
Right.
But I was running out of space, and then I had the idea. I sleep in a 4-poster bed, of making like more feet, quite high feet for the bed, so it's even higher than it otherwise would be. And there's a huge space under my bed now that I can put crates of work, and one crate on top of another. But my bed now is very high, but I'm used to it.
Wow. Thank you.
I just have another question, if that's okay, Jeannie. I'm really curious to hear more about you saying you don't talk about your new ideas or new projects because you feel like that kind of halts the creativity, I think is kind of maybe what you were saying. Is that so? How do you then process those ideas if you don't kind of speak them out loud? How do you kind of develop and continue to evolve those ideas?
Well, I work through the storyline, the complete project as layout. So I do lots of drawings, and I gradually evolve those till it gets to the point where I can see no way of taking it further. And that's when I send it to my publisher. And then I have a discussion with my editor, and there's usually things that are questioned and things that she feels can be improved on. And sometimes I agree and sometimes I don't. When we get to a point where both of us are happy, that's when I start the collages. There are a couple of friends I talk my ideas through with, but actually that's harder now because both of them have passed away. So yeah, finding someone who's on exactly the right wavelength isn't easy. And if I talk them through with the wrong person, again, it can actually take away rather than help.
As you're writing, are you starting to form the collage kind of images in your head? Like, is that, do they kind of walk alongside each other?
I don't think about the collage. I think about the image, not as a collage, but as a drawing. And that's how I work. And the words and the images, they evolve alongside each other. They evolve together. Sometimes the words come more easily. Sometimes the image comes more easily. But I'm working on both at the same time.
And they kind of talk with each other.
Yes.
Way. Yeah. Yes. Lovely. Thank you.
Jeannie, I have another question. Whose work do you admire? Who are some of your kind of leading lights?
When I was at art school, I was really fortunate to have, he actually wasn't a tutor for my year, but he kind of took me under his wing, Raymond Briggs. And he showed me in a way through his work that a children's book, because I'd always thought of kind of children's books in a kind of cliched way, but he showed me that a children's book can be anything. So it really opened my perception to possibilities. And lots of artists in different ways. There's no one person I can say, oh, it's just like little bits of different artists I found inspiring.
Do you think you're more inspired by visual artists than, say, filmmakers or photographers?
Yes, yeah. But it's quite rare actually for me to go to an exhibition and be totally captivated. But when I am, it's fantastic because I walk out of that gallery and I see the world in their way, in a whole other way. And that's really special.
And Jeannie, can I ask, I've only got one book of yours. All right, that's the only book I've got. And I look at this every month. And then I saw that you had your Desert Jungle book out, and then I went online and had a look at some other books and borrowed them from the library. And then it seems to me that you have moved more from, well, I haven't studied them all, to be fair, but more, you know, Millicent and grandfather and grandmother, they're more about not human beings, but they're more about individual people or people as individuals. And now it looks as if your work has moved more towards the environment. How has that happened?
I think coming to Australia and experiencing the environment here and doing field trips on my own, and
Oh, that's okay.
yes, yes. So
Right.
it was really, as I said in my slide talk, it was really where the forest meets the sea was the beginning of that happening.
Mm. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, thank you. Mm.
Hi, Jenny.
Hello.
Such a good, beautiful book. I'm very impressed. I have a question that I very agree that you just said we should encourage children to be more closer to the nature. I wonder, after you spend so much time in nature environment, you spend so much time with the children who are closer to nature. What's the difference you find that those people, those children who are close to nature have some precious characteristics like they have, but the children in cities who are not that close to nature don't have? That's why we need to advocate this.
Children who live in cities can still be close to nature. I think it's often the effect of their parents, that they're not taken. Maybe they don't have gardens, or they're not taken to natural environments. I think sometimes their parents have a fear of nature, and then the child sort of catches that feeling. I think it's really giving children opportunities to spend time in nature is really important. It was interesting. One time, this was years ago, I was in Tasmania, and we were staying at a camping site, and walking from there to this really amazing place. It was probably about 3 kilometers walk away, and there was a young boy who he kind of attached himself to us, and he wanted to come walking with us, so we took him, and he had a stick and he kept bashing all the vegetation around, and in the end I said, look, please don't do that, you're destroying things. And I sort of talked to him about it, and he stopped doing it. What was interesting was the very next day he wanted to do the same walk again. He kept pestering and pestering, and so in the end we relented, and he wanted to bring his friend. And what was interesting, his friend was doing the same thing, had a stick and was bashing all the vegetation around. And it was lovely to hear this original boy telling his friend not to do it, and why not. But what was interesting too was apparently this boy went to his father took him to the same campsite every year for a week. And he'd never really gone walking and exploring around. But when he did, he just obviously got so much from it. He was captivated. So I think it's really important to give children opportunities to explore and discover nature and realize how special it is.
Yeah, such an interesting story. Thank you for your sharing.
Jeannie, where is the original artwork for this book on display at the moment?
Desert Jungle. It was at Penrith Regional Art Gallery, which was the organising gallery for the travelling exhibition. And it's travelling onto about 7 venues. But COVID has made it really difficult to book venues more than about 6 months or a year at most ahead. And the cost of travelling has gone up threefold, and it's still increasing. So it's been quite difficult this time. I think the next venue is, my understanding is South Australian State Library. And I think that's about December, but we're waiting for the exact dates from them before I put it on my website.
Oh, thank you for that.
But from that point on, it's going from one venue to another. Yeah, but at the moment it's resting.
Okay.
Well, Jeannie, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for sharing your insight into your process and your work. It's been an absolute delight, and thank you so much on behalf of Create. For those of you that are new to these webinars, we hold them every month, at least once a month, and we'd love for you to join the Create Centre. It's free, as I said, and to come and join us for more of these webinars. But I hope you'll all join me in congratulating Jeannie on just a wonderful presentation. So thank you very much, Jeannie, and all the best for the next work.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. And thank you, Robin.
Pleasure.
And thank you all for listening.
Our great pleasure. All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night.